If you're anything like me, just hearing the word boundaries might make you feel a little bit anxious or even intimidated. Trust me, I get it. For a long time, boundaries felt like this scary negative thing. But let me tell you, that is because people often misunderstand the purpose and the beauty of what boundaries can actually do for your life. And so, boundaries are one of the most loving gifts that you can give to yourself and to the people around you. It's not about, shutting people out. It's not about being selfish. Boundaries are about creating a space where your needs, your priorities are honored. So, sit back, relax, and let's talk about the beauty of boundaries and how they can protect your peace. So, what are boundaries? At the core, boundaries are simple limits that you set to protect your emotional being, your physical, your spiritual well being. They're not for other people, like they are literally for you. Think of boundaries like these guardrails on the road. They're not there to stop you from moving forward, but instead they're there to keep you safe and aligned so that you do not veer off course. And so when you're tired, distracted, overwhelmed, those guardrails are there to let you know, like, whoa, like slow down, stay in your lane. And that's exactly what boundaries are for us and what they do in our life. They're not meant to block anybody out, but they're meant to protect your peace, your time, your energy. They help you to show up as your best self. And the reason why they are so important is, again, they help you to protect your peace. Protecting your peace is one of the most underrated yet powerful things that you can do for yourself. Listen, you can have all the money, all the success, all the accomplishments in the world, but if you don't have peace, none of it matters. Peace is something that you have to actively work for and intentionally protect every single day. And boundaries are the key to making this happen. They prevent overwhelm, they prevent burnout. And without them, it's so easy to fall into cycles of overwhelm, burnout, resentment. And you find yourself being pulled in every direction, saying yes to things that you don't have the capacity for. And then before you know it, you're exhausted and bitter. Okay. So boundaries help you manage your time and energy so that you can avoid all of that. They help you to show up fully as yourself. When you have them in place, you can show up fully as who God calls you to be because you're not overextending yourself or constantly being drained. It allows you when you're full to actually pour into people and the things that matter the most to you. And so what do these boundaries look like in action? Saying no to extra responsibilities when your plate is already full. Limiting interactions with people who drain your energy, okay? Taking time for yourself to rest and recharge without feeling guilty. For example, you know that like one person who just sucks the life out of you every time they're around, like every single time. Boundaries might simply mean limiting your interactions with them or deciding maybe not to even engage with them at all sometimes. Like you have the control over your environment and your peace. Like you have that control. And while you're having that control, you want to make sure to guard your heart. Proverbs 4:23 tells us that above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And so boundaries are how you guard your heart. They ensure that what flows out of you is love, joy, and peace, and not exhaustion and overwhelm. And so the key is you got to do the work. Like real talk, you got to do the work. They're not easy to set, especially if you're coming from a life of trauma, challenges, or people pleasing. But if you want peace, if you want growth, if you want alignment with purpose, then you've got to do the work. And, it won't be perfect. You have to show up every day, being intentional and striving to protect what matters to you most. And so I want to dive into the journey of setting boundaries and how to protect your peace because, believe it or not, you deserve it. Growing up and, going through everything that life throws at us, like we sometimes often avoid doing the hard work because we think that peace and happiness are just gonna come for us naturally if we wish for it. But y'all, let me tell you, like you got to do the work, like period. Like if you want to protect your peace, it does require effort. It's something that you have to intentionally fight for. And so I want to talk about some common boundary challenges, some things that people face when they are trying to set boundaries because it's so real. And these are some of the reasons why we are afraid to set boundaries. And number one is fear of rejection. One of the hardest parts about setting boundaries is that we fear that people won't like us anymore. Like we worry that if we say no, if we set limits, that people might reject us, they may pull away, they may want to stop being around us. And you know what? I mean, like, I ain't gonna hold you. Some people might pull away. I mean, that's the truth. But at the end of the day, the right people, the ones who truly love and respect you, they're going to adjust to that new season of your life of setting boundaries. Boundaries don't push the right people away. What they do is filter out the wrong ones. So don't be afraid to set boundaries out of a fear of rejection, because anybody who rejects you for having boundaries likely is not somebody that you need in your life anyway. Go figure. Number two, guilt. Now this one hits hard because how many times have you felt guilty for saying no? For prioritizing your own needs, especially if you're a parent or a caregiver or someone who's constantly giving to others. It can feel almost unnatural to set time aside for yourself. And society often teaches us to feel selfish when we prioritize our well-being. And you'll hear people say things like, "Wow, that's so selfish of you." And when they say this, it reinforces that guilt. But let me remind you that there's absolutely nothing selfish about protecting your peace. You cannot pour from an empty cup. I'll say that over and over, time and time again, because you have to have something in your cup for yourself and enough to then pour into others. And so what boundaries does is it helps you to keep that balance. Number three, fear of conflict. A lot of us would rather bite our tongues than to risk any type of confrontation. Instead of, like setting boundaries to protect our peace, we try to avoid conflict altogether. But when you avoid conflict, truth be told, is it doesn't make it go away. Like it doesn't make the issue at hand go away. It just keeps brewing in the background. And eventually it leads to you being resentful. If you're not putting boundaries in place because you're afraid of conflict, you're afraid of drama, you are doing yourself a disservice. Learning to address issues with kindness and firmness is something that you have to do if you want true peace. And, I'll be honest, like this was a tough lesson for me, and it still is. Like most of my life, people took my kindness for weakness. I am naturally a very nice and approachable person. And for a long time, I didn't realize that some people were taking advantage of that. But now I understand that I don't have to change who I am at the core. I just have to put boundaries in place to protect myself. And boundaries allow you to stay true to who you are while keeping the vultures and the people who don't mean you any good away from you to keep from draining you. Pushback from others is another challenge you might face when you start setting boundaries. People might question, you and say, "Who are you to set boundaries?" Or like they may just not respect your boundaries outright from the start, because it's new for them. And if you're a people pleaser, if you're overcoming, again, this is especially true for you, because if you've been saying yes to everybody your whole life and suddenly now you're saying no, people might not know how to handle that. Matter of fact, they won't know how to handle that. And what they'll do is they'll start testing you, they'll push your buttons, they'll try to get you to revert back to your old ways. But you got to stand firm, okay? You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable at first. It's not easy, but the more you enforce your boundaries, the more natural it's going to become. And then eventually people will respect your limits because they'll see that you're very serious about it. And so I want to dive into how to set boundaries, because for many of us, boundaries are something that we've never been taught. This is so new for us. Most of us are just now, as adults, learning how to set boundaries and how to actually put them in place. And, that's okay. It's never too late to start anything, including setting boundaries. So, how do you set boundaries? Number one, you got to know your limits. This is the first step. Sit down and reflect. Like, ask yourself, like, what drains my energy? What brings me peace? Where in my life do I feel stretched too thin? And most importantly, what do I need to say no to so that I can say yes more to myself? You have to know your limits in every area of your life, in your friendships, in your work, in your family life, your personal time, because when you know your limits, you can show up as the best version of yourself in every single area. Okay. Next, clearly communicate your boundaries. People are not mind readers no matter what we may think. We make the mistake of thinking that people should just know how we feel or what we want or what we're thinking, but they don't. And so that's why communication is so important. And one thing I've noticed, let me just say this, is that many adults, like, we don't know how to communicate, y'all, like for real. Instead of having a conversation, people would rather ghost you, they would rather avoid conflict, they would rather just disappear. But avoiding communication does not fix absolutely a thing, okay? Nothing. And like when you communicate your boundaries, you're able to let other people know what works for you and what doesn't. And then if somebody consistently violate these boundaries after you communicated them, that's when you can decide, what steps you need to take next to protect your peace. But it has to be communicated. Staying consistent. Now, this one is hard. Staying consistent is like where most people really, really, really struggle. It's like, going to the gym. Like at the start of the year, we're all hyped up, imagining our six pack, ready to put it into work. And then a few weeks later, we're back in the drive through line. We've fallen off track. And it's the same thing with boundaries. Like when you start enforcing them, again, people might push back, especially if they're not used to you putting up boundaries. But you got to stand firm. You got to be consistent with it. If you flake and start backing down, people going to keep testing your limits over and over and over. So you have to stay consistent, enforce your boundary to love, but be firm. And then over time, people will see that you are serious and they'll begin to respect the limits that you set on your life. And so I want to give you some real life practical examples of what it's like setting boundaries, or you may be this person or you may know this person. And so I just want to talk through a few scenarios so that you can have some practical tools to use while you navigate these challenges in these streets, okay? Number one, this person right here, the overcommitted friend. If you are the overcommitted friend, let's just say that you're that friend who's always showing up, you're always saying yes, you're always overcommitting. And then, there's your friend who constantly is asking you for favors, even when they can visibly see that you're swamped and that you have a lot on your plate. And you feel bad for saying no. So you keep saying yes and yes and yes. And now you're overwhelmed. And now you just stretch super thin. Here's how you're going to handle this. You're going to say, hey, friend, I really value our friendship. You are my girl. And, I've always got your back. You know this, but I've been feeling a little stretched lately. I've got a lot on my plate and I need to take a step back to focus on my responsibilities that I have in front of me right now. So I won't be able to help you out as much as I like, but I hope you understand. This approach is one that's simple, it's direct, it's still kind. You are honoring your needs while still showing love and respect to your friend, which is most importantly. And if they're a truly good friend, they're going to understand it. And so communication, is key to healthy, sustainable relationships, even when it may feel hard at first. Next is the energy drainer. So we all know this person, the one who leaves you feeling emotionally drained after every single conversation, and they're always venting, always being negative, and it just feels like every interaction is just them dumping their problems on you. And you wanted to be the good friend, you listen, you encourage them, over and over. But at some point, it becomes too much, especially if it's the same situation over and over again. And so here's what you can do in that situation. You can simply say, hey, I care about you so much. I love you. I want the best for you. I want to be here for you. But I've noticed that our conversations lately have been really focused on a lot of negative, and it's starting to drain me. And, I want to hear about the good things in your life too. Like, tell me, what's the highlight of your day? Like, what's something that's exciting that's coming up this week? You know, when you switch this approach shifts the narrative without shutting them out. Like you're instead guiding the conversation towards positive, which not only protects your energy, but then it also helps them to see the brighter side of things. Sometimes being the light in someone's life mean encouraging them to see their own light. And sometimes that's all it takes. Next, the work overload. So this one is for my hard workers out there, the ones who are always the go-to person at work. Your boss keeps asking you to stay late, take on extra projects, and you keep saying yes, even though your plate is full because you just that girl, you just that boy, you're a great worker, right? And so it starts to take a toll on your family life, your personal time, and even the quality of your work. And so what you want to do in this situation is say to your boss, like, I really want to do my best on the task that I've already been assigned, but I won't be able to take on any extra hours right now. Okay. Like, can we prioritize what's most urgent instead? Notice how you're not saying no to everything. You're offering a solution that protects your time and energy while still being professional. And this allows you to show up as your best self and deliver quality work rather than overcommitting and producing half done and sloppy work. So I hope these examples, show you how boundaries can work in real life situations. Again, it's not about shutting people out. It's not about being harsh. It's simply about communicating your needs in a way that honors yourself and honor the people around you. And again, boundaries does not make you unkind and selfish. In fact, it's the opposite because it shows that you care enough about yourself and your friends and family and people around you to show up as the best version of yourself. So I hope this example inspired you to start setting some boundaries in your life, friend, okay? Remember, boundaries are a blessing. They protect your peace, they nurture your relationships, they help you stay aligned with your purpose, which is the most important thing. But now I want to bring it back to faith because boundaries is not just about self care. Boundaries are also about honoring God's will for your life. And so when you set boundaries, what you're basically doing is creating space to focus on what God called you to do. You're saying, Lord, I trust you to guide my steps, and I won't let any and all of these distractions pull me away from your plan. And so when you have boundaries, what it's helping you do is to walk in alignment with God's purpose for your life. It keeps you from being pulled in 1,000 directions, meeting everybody else's needs, and then losing sight of your own journey. And for me, as somebody who's a visionary, I have so many dreams, many times, so many ideas, so many projects that I be wanting to pursue. But if I'm not careful, I'll let other people pull me into all of their plans. And then I find myself being burnt out in the process. And don't get me wrong, like supporting other people is so important. We are called to community. We are called to lift each other up, support one another, and, to be a part of what other people are building, but not at the cost of burning ourselves out, getting ourselves off track from what God specifically called us to do. So your faith step for the week is I want to challenge you to set one small boundaries. Just start small, something so simple. Maybe it could be something as small as saying no to something that you don't have the capacity for, or limiting time with somebody who is draining your energy. Then observe how it feels to honor your needs. Take it in, sit with it. Remember, boundaries are not selfish. They help you to show up whole for yourself and for the people that you are called to serve. Faith. Trust that setting boundaries honors God's will for your life. Facts. Boundaries are a reflection of self love and respect. They protect your peace and they help you stay aligned with God's purpose. Feelings. You may feel uncomfortable or even guilty at first, but enforcing boundaries is an act of faith and courage, not selfishness. Your faith formation for the week, say this with me: I honor my needs and protect my peace with God's wisdom. My boundaries are a reflection of the love and respect that I have for myself and for the other people that I love. I trust that God's purpose for me is greater than any distraction. Friend, learning to set boundaries is a process, and I know this all too well because I'm currently on this journey with you even right now. And it takes a lot of reflection, a lot of consistency, and most importantly, a whole lot of faith. But let me tell you, the reward is so worth it because you're going to find yourself living a life that is full of peace, full of purpose, and in alignment with God's will for your life. So stay on the straight and narrow. You got this. And as always, stay blessed, keep the faith, and remember, God loves you. I love you. You are loved.